So, welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Lisa. It's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, Cleanne.
You're very welcome. So, Lisa, tell the listeners about you and what was the driving force of you becoming an attorney?
So I think, first of all, it's more than me becoming an attorney because I had already decided to become a matrimonial attorney. So I had been in the fashion business and had gone through my own divorce. And as I was going through my divorce, I realized that what had really, I guess, irritated me would be a good word, was that I would reach out to my divorce attorney and I would get crickets, basically, right? For, a week, 2 weeks, sometimes days, whatever. And these were all pressing issues. They were either financial issues or custodial issues. And I thought to myself, this is something that I could actually do, but I would have to go back and start my bachelor's degree, and I would have to go to law school. And I was ready at that point to make a switch from the fashion business to something else. And I decided to apply to Fordham, got in my undergraduate, and then went on to Fordham Law. And I had a very strong focus on being a family law matrimonial attorney. So that's really how I got there.
Wow, that's kind of like because you were doing something else and then you got into something else. How was the transition?
So the transition was pretty smooth. Law school is a lot of work, as you might remember. It's an incredible amount of work, and I think I underestimated how much work it would be. I think part of it is making sure that you can do those long hours, and and of course I was competing with people who were younger than me at that time, but I was a strong student and a very good law school student as well as an undergrad student, and really enjoyed the experience, loved the courses, particularly, the criminal law course, the evidence course, and of course the family law course. And then actually my third year started working in an internship for a matrimonial attorney. I was also had a child at that point. I had gotten remarried by that point. So I had a lot of different things that had changed in my life, but all for the good.
Wow. So, Lisa, what is different when you divorce or you marry the second time around? Women sometimes blame themselves for failed marriage. What do you think is the, what do you think, why do you think it's common today that women blame themselves for failed marriages?
So you have two questions there. So I'm going to answer the first. I think it is different for the second marriage. I think that you've learned a lot.
Mhm.
You're older, frankly, right? You've matured, and your priorities may be different at that point. I think that you've thought about whether or not you want to have a family, how big a family you want to have by perhaps your second marriage, what is important to you, what you're looking for in terms of a spouse. We've been married now 27 years, and we are madly in love 27 years later and have such a great time together and really think alike and have a lot of common interests. And I think that some of those things I didn't necessarily have with my first spouse. And we didn't necessarily think the same in terms of what our priorities were and what we like to do, and all of those things. So I think that the second time around can be really fabulous. I meet so many people who say to me, I'm never going to get married again. And I think, oh, you might. The second time around is really, it's a lot of fun. And so I couldn't be happier. And then you had asked me a second question, and I'm going to ask you to ask me again.
So, women sometimes blame themselves for failed marriages, and that happens a lot. Why do you think that's common, that women tend to blame themselves?
I think women tend to take responsibility a lot for things that go wrong. I think that, I'm not a therapist, so I don't know why women do that. It's not, frankly, in my DNA to do that. So, I think I look at things very realistically. I don't think either one of us was necessarily at fault. I think it just didn't work for various reasons. And I think that sometimes marriages just either don't work from the beginning or people change over time. And I think that's natural, particularly when you get married younger. You've got a lot of years, right? And I think that I look at some of the people who are married for 25, 27, 30 years, And this might have been their first marriage
Mhm.
as opposed to their second marriage. And I think that they have changed, their priorities have changed, and they may have grown differently. And I think that that is really what happens. I don't know why women would blame themselves, because I think that there's really no blame to go around necessarily. If a marriage doesn't work, I'm not sure it's about blame. I think it's about figuring out how to move on, and not about looking back as to who's to blame for it, because frankly, everybody probably had some blame in it.
So, Lisa, can you pinpoint 5 mistakes that people make before asking for a divorce?
Sure. So 5 mistakes. So I would say mistake number one is they either are abused or are abusive. That would be a mistake.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily, obviously, if you're abused, it's not a mistake necessarily, but it is a mistake to stay in the marriage longer than you should. And if you're putting yourself in danger, I don't know that I would call it a mistake, but certainly you need to get help as fast as you possibly can and get out of that situation. And I think people stay in abusive relationships probably too long. Again, I don't think that that's a mistake. I think it's a very big mistake to be abusive to someone. I think that that is a definite error in judgment. And
Mhm.
I think that there is a consequence sometimes for that, whether it be financial or otherwise. I also think involving your children
Mhm.
in marriages that are going wrong, fighting in front of the children, saying things about the other parent, that is a mistake. Letting somebody control your finances to the extent that you are not aware of or in control of your finances, or a joint partner, that's a mistake. Okay, that is a very big mistake, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. I think also, I would say the other mistake is just basically removing yourself from, and people will disagree about this, but I'm going to say this is something I think is a mistake. Removing yourself from the job market for a long period of time um, is a mistake. Um, and deciding that you are going to go into a marriage and not protect your assets, such as in a prenup or in a postnup,
Mhm.
that's a mistake. So there, that was your 5 right there.
Wow. So, Lisa, if one person has a business and the other person is making some profit out of that business, after the divorce, how would you kind of counsel the person in order, would that person get half of the person's business, even if it wasn't, they were not involved in that business? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, I think I do.
Oh.
So essentially what you're asking me is, if during the marriage there's a business
Mhm.
and one person is running that business and has that business, and the other person is also reaping the benefits of that business during the marriage, but not running the business, what does that person get, who is essentially not the business owner, but is a spouse of the business owner?
Mhm.
Correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
It's a
correct.
great question. And so it's almost never 50%. I actually haven't seen any cases where the non-titled spouse to the business would get 50% of the value. And essentially, what the cases say is that the person who went out and actually ran the business on a day-to-day basis and did the work is going to get the bigger percentage. Now, what does it look like? It depends on so many factors. So, how long was the marriage? What, if any, contributions did the non-titled spouse make to the business? And that could be direct or indirect contributions. So direct in terms of I'm the wife and I went in and I maybe did the bookkeeping for the business. That's a direct contribution to the business. I socialized with planned dinner parties, did all sorts of things to help. Maybe I wrote thank you cards or bought gifts for clients, or did certain things that aided the business, those would be more indirect contributions. I was supportive and listened to my spouse when he or she came home talking about the business and giving them ideas and having some feedback. That also would be certainly an indirect contribution to the business. So those would be indirect contributions to the business. I met with clients and actually sold them goods. Okay. That would be a direct contribution to the business. So direct versus indirect. So those would be indirect versus direct contributions. And depending upon how much indirect or indirect contributions, and indirect, by the way, could be raising the children, having the family, making sure that you were available to take the dry cleaning or for the grocery shopping or cook the meals so that when your spouse came home, all of those things were done and that person could focus on their business. Those would be indirect contributions. And depending again, age, length of marriage, what the business is, direct versus indirect, I would say that you're looking anywhere from 20% to maybe the very, very highest if you were directly involved in that business in a long-term marriage, I don't know, 40 something percent. Okay. But it's very, very rare that you're going to get to 50%. And I think the most of the range is probably between 25 and maybe like 35%.
Wow. So the person who is more indirectly involved with the business would get a higher percentage?
No, no, the person who is indirectly involved in the business would get that 25 to 35%,
Okay.
and the other person would get the bigger percentage, meaning the 65 to 70 something percent, right? Or even 80% perhaps of the business. And so what would happen is usually there is a valuation of the business
Hmm.
and then there is a buyout for the other spouse so that you don't remain connected after the divorce. Um, you're able to each go on with your own lives and there's a payout.
So what are 5 questions you should ask a divorce lawyer like yourself when somebody come to you? What are 5 questions that someone should be asking you when you're interviewing them?
They should ask about my experience, whether I'm familiar with the court system in the area that they are going to be in. So, for example, we are very familiar with Manhattan and Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, some Dutchess, Orange, and Kings County. I would say that those are our main areas where we are familiar. I know you're all the way up in Utica. I wouldn't be familiar with that area. I probably would never take a case in that area because I'm just unfamiliar with it. And there's all sorts of court rules that you need to know. And you also want to know, you want to have been before the judge maybe several times so that is the judge going to lean in this way or in that way on certain issues so that you can guide your client. So I would say where they practice normally. Certainly their knowledge about the different issues that you are basically dealing with, whether it be wasteful dissipation of assets, meaning somebody who's been gambling or using monies for substance abuse or for infidelity, all of those kinds of things, valuations of businesses, income stream analysis, RSUs, stock options. Are they familiar with those, with that type of situation? Do they deal with what kind of cases are they dealing with? Are they dealing with high stakes litigation cases? Do they go into court? Are they familiar with trial work? Do they work and enjoy doing trials, frankly? Are they capable of settling your case, negotiating your case? That would be like your second area of questions that I would think that you would want to know. An estimate of how long they think your case would take, an estimate of the costs involved in your case. And obviously it's not going to be an exact figure, but there could be some sort of range perhaps. And you're not going to necessarily be able to hold them to it because frankly, it's never, you never know what's going to happen in a case. What is the strategy for how they're going to deal with your case? That would be my fifth question.
So, Lisa, how can the listeners get in contact with you do you have a book coming out or do you have a book on that topic of divorce?
So I don't have a book. I've thought about writing a book, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and do it. But they can get in touch with me. I do write blogs all the time. I have a blog on Psychology Today that people can look at. I also have a very huge LinkedIn presence under my name, Lisa Zeiderman. And I have a blog, lisazeiderman.com. They can also write to me at lz@mzw law.com. They can reach me at 914-455-1000.
Sounds great. So when you decide to go with the book, are you gonna have, do you have a specific time or that you're thinking about doing the book, or is that like off the table?
So it's not off the table. It's funny. I started to write a book
Mhm.
twice, actually. I'll share that with you. And it was essentially, I worked very hard in it. I had actually a co-author, and then we got to the point of, being able to market it. And we got kind of caught up in one particular issue, and then we dropped it for a while. So I might go back and pick it up. I have a few people who want to write books with me. I am interested in writing a book. I think that there's a lot that I've seen and can say, and that people can certainly, would be interested, frankly, in reading, something that I would write, but I have to figure out exactly what I want to say now. I had what I thought was a great idea, but then got a little bogged down, as I said, on the one issue.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we're looking for that coming up soon.
Okay.
So Lisa, what advice would you give someone who wants to start a second career in their midlife?
So I think they should go for it. I think that they should do what they feel passionate about. I became a lawyer really at 42. And I have built an incredible practice in probably the toughest city, out there, right? In New York. And I'm very proud. We're about 50 people in my firm. We started in 2013, and we do what I think is excellent work for basically high stakes litigation and high stakes negotiation in terms of custody and finance. And I think people can actually make that difference in their lives. I don't think it's unusual anymore to have more than one career in your lifetime. And I think that it's most important that you be passionate about what you're doing and that you enjoy doing it, because that's what you're going to be great at.
Great. So Lisa, thank you for sharing this information with us. And thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to drop one thing for you, Cleanne. So I'm board chair of an organization called Savvy Ladies, which you may be familiar with. It is a organization, not for profit, its mission is to help women basically empower themselves through financial literacy. And we have a free helpline where women can actually either download the Savvy Ladies app on their phone or call into the helpline or write in at savvyladies.org and be connected with a free financial professional who will answer their financial questions free of charge. And we help about 3,000 women a year. So I just want to put that out there for women who are looking for some answers in terms of their finances. It's a great resource.